It's the beginning of the dry season, and after travelling 4,000 miles from Melbourne, we drive out along the deep water wharf at Broome to one of Australia's traditional pearling luggers. Reaching this graceful vessel is the climax of 3 years planning and organising. Designed and built in Broome, this boat is one of the few capable of taking us north along the uncharted Kimberlys coast. Supplies and fuel sufficient for the long months ahead are carefully loaded. Now our Haflinger is lowered into position. This small four-wheel drive unit will carry us into areas only accessible from the sea, areas that never before have been reached by vehicle. After days of hectic planning, Dave and Boss Dog are the first on board. Boss Dog's not too keen about the whole idea. Now it's my turn. Hercules is sure we're going to fall, so he makes the job even more difficult by hanging on too. Boss Dog, recovered from his ordeal, welcomes Hercules aboard. It's next morning before the tide is right, and we head out into the Indian Ocean for one of the greatest adventures of our lives. Tom Wigan is our only crew member at present. He belongs to the Bardi tribe, seafaring aborigines from scattered islands 100 miles to the north. The constant southeast winds make travelling pleasant, and we spend time organising the gear. Dave lets out a line, and within minutes lands a good turrum. We won't be short of food on this trip. Watching Dave, I realize that the adventure we've planned for so long is really beginning. We are only hours out from Broome, and yet already the outside world seems distant and unimportant. All next day, we're on the lookout for the fleet. And there they are, the last of Australia's famous pearling luggers. Today there are less than a dozen still working for Shell, but back in the 20s, more than 400 luggers worked up and down the coast. With the popularity of plastics, the pearling industry almost died. It's been revived with the development of a new industry, the production of cultured pearls. These luggers are collecting live shell for the pearl farms. We watch fascinated as they move rhythmically across the shell beds, the crews working as a team. At sundown, the luggers head for the shelter of land and anchor. We arrange with the skipper of the B1 to go aboard his lugger before dawn the following day and watch the search for shell. Eight miles offshore, Yusuf, the head diver, prepares to descend. It's on with the helmet and into the water. It's 70 feet down to the seabed. The restless tide cuts visibility down to about 4 feet. The tender is the diver's lifeline. By means of signals along the rope, he knows exactly what's happening below. Yusuf picks up a sponge. It cleans greasy dishes better than detergents and hot water. He'll sell this big triton shell to a conchologist back in Broome. As he picks up a shell, he signals to his tender to pull him into the upright position again. The lugger moves forward, and the search continues. The tide quickens, cutting visibility even more. There are few jobs that have claimed more lives. Countless men have perished hunting for pearls. Their lonely graves remind the divers of the ever-present dangers. Today, Yusuf is lucky. Shell is plentiful, and he easily fills his bag. Filling his suit with air, he rises rapidly to the surface. As soon as his helmet is removed, Yusuf directs the lugger back to the thickest shell patches, and the crew immediately begin preparing the collected shell. Old and wormy shell is cleaned, packed into bags, and sent back to Broome for sale. A natural pearl is found in only about 1 in every 20,000 oysters. So everyone is pleased when Othman opens a shell and finds a beautiful pearl. It's an exquisite natural half pearl which will fit perfectly into a ring. All the good shell is packed into baskets, and twice a day the pickup boat comes alongside and takes the shell back to the mothership, the Curie Pearl. The shell, kept alive in big saltwater tanks, is taken 300 miles north to the cultured pearl farm at Curie Bay. We make arrangements to visit this farm later in the year. But Curie Bay is far from our thoughts as we thank our new friend Yusuf for letting us dive with him. Now we're on our way again, north to the Lacepede Islands. This group of low, sandy spits, 20 miles off the coast, abounds in wildlife. As we drop anchor, sharks weave below us, and hundreds of brown gannets wheel overhead. The younger ones, knowing no fear, pay us a visit. The Lacepedes are the main breeding grounds for the green turtles, and as they begin mating, sharks move into the shallow water to attack these defenseless creatures. After dark, the sharks swim beneath our lugger in sweeping circles. Ever ready for excitement, Dave tries his hand at fishing. Immediately, a silver shape glides in, attacks, and the fight is on. Attracted by the turmoil, more sharks arrive, and for the next 6 hours we fight and struggle to pull these killers on board. The stripes on the body identify these as tiger sharks, recognized as one of the most dangerous to man. These tigers have 5 layers of teeth, top and bottom, continually moving forward as the front ones wear down, so the killer always has a perfect set of teeth. It's been estimated that tiger sharks replace up to 24,000 teeth over 10 years. We cut the teeth from each shark to keep as a memento of this eventful night. In the morning, we hooked the biggest of them all, a 12-footer. As the shark rolls, we notice a number of sucker fish swimming around. Intrigued, I join them to observe their movements more closely. The water's filthy dirty, visibility is almost zero, and I begin to regret my curiosity. The sea is alive with sharks, and it's impossible to see them. The suckerfish mill around, but filming them is very difficult. We organize a block and tackle from the mast and heave this man-eater on board. We're staggered by its tremendous girth. A shark this size must kill large numbers of turtles and birds. Dissecting its stomach, we find complete flippers from large turtles and a young turtle swallowed whole with barely a tooth mark on it. And looking at the torn pieces of flesh, I realize that a shark attack may have been very close when I was in the water earlier. In on the beach, an exhausted turtle struggles back to the sea after spending the night laying eggs. We feel sorry for her and hope she doesn't swim straight into the jaws of a waiting shark in her weary condition. Over the sand spits, schools of fish move with the current. Few places offer such ideal fishing conditions. Warm days, pleasant surroundings, and the fish always on the bite. On every cast we have a strike. I hook a big queenfish, but with the light tackle, it must be played carefully. Dave's got a nice trevally on the line, and he skillfully plays it into the shallows. Boss Dog hides Dave's catch from Hercules. But Herc knows what's going on, and at the first opportunity, he grabs a fish and trots off along the beach, very proud of himself. The fish come in one after another, and we really enjoy this sport. However, we only keep enough to eat. Hercules seems a bit confused. First we catch him, then we let him go. Young pelicans keep a safe distance as we head for the main island. Here, thousands of brown gannets are breeding. The young are compulsive eaters, and they treat their parents with little respect during feeding time. And when it's satisfied, the chick settles into its mother's shadow. This booby, taking its first steps, finds progress a little slow. And this bloke is desperate for his mum. In groups all across the islands, the gregarious cormorants are breeding. They can nests of grass about a foot high, and the young spend all day squawking and panting in the heat, waiting for their parents to return with food. The adults preen their feathers and dry their wings thoroughly before moving to the nest. And once on the nest, this spectacular feeding ritual takes place. Some distance away is a colony of frigate birds. They're very aggressive. Even the young ones are always fighting. At nightfall, we head off to the fishing grounds. Our light panics the fish as we move in closer. A long tom swims within range and Dave drives his spear home. He's careful of those needle-sharp teeth. Although rather bony, these fish are very sweet to eat. This kind of fishing takes a lot of practice, and it's harder than it looks. A gannet, dazzled by the light, settles in the boat. Dave tries to make friends with it, but is rebuffed. Just as quickly as it appeared, it vanishes into the night. But the real trophies are the elusive mullet. Their large scales and lightning reflexes make them a deceptive target. As usual, it's fish for breakfast. The sucker fish that I filmed earlier have taken up residence under the lugger, scavenging for food. There are dozens of them, and I hook a few to see how they function. Their most unique feature is this suctorial disc on the head. They use it to attach themselves to sharks, rays, and other large marine creatures. The sucking pad is a double series of vacuum cups, and it's very efficient. These fish traveled with us for weeks all the way along the coast. From the Lassipedes, we travel to the scattered islands in King's Sound. These islands are the territory of the Bardi tribe. But before we have a chance to join the Aborigines, we experience the most terrifying time of our entire trip. At dusk, we anchored in the calm waters between the islands. But during the night, a 40-knot wind blew up, and we were pounded by a wild, rolling sea. Luckily, we've swung bow first into the swell, but our anchor's dragging and the situation is very serious. While I'm violently seasick, Dave tries to take a sounding. The winds get stronger, but we still have sufficient water under us. We watch anxiously as the giant waves surge past. Any minute now, we could be smashed onto those rocks. Look out! She's over! The rope snaps, the boat flips, and Dave, oblivious of his own safety, dives in to save it. The dogs sense the danger too. Within minutes, he's pounded onto the rocks, struggling to save that boat. By low tide, we're dangerously close to the reef, but the wind drops, and we float a rope in to Dave on 4-gallon drums. We drag Dave and the boat back to the lugger. Somehow, the boat has stayed together and is still usable. Apart from bad gashes, Dave is uninjured. Our outboard has sunk to the bottom, but Dave's spear gun and our wetsuits floated in onto the rocks. The dogs, sensing that the worst is over, go quite silly. But it's back to work. Our outboard motor must be found. Today's events are all a bit much for Boss Dog. It's been underwater for 8 hours, but within minutes we have it going again, and it never gives us any trouble for the rest of the trip. The next day, Tom takes us to Biana Island, where his tribe, the Bardis, are camped. We meet old Juby, the one man who can handle luggers better than anyone. The man we hope will be our guide along the Kimberley coast. But before sailing north, we live with these people until they accept us as friends. Their whole life depends upon the sea. It's their main source of food. Juby and his wife often hunt mud crabs at low tide. These massive crustaceans live in holes among the mangroves. Juby prefers to keep his alive until it's ready to be cooked. These crabs are a gourmet's delight and command the highest prices in exclusive restaurants, but to Juby and his family, they're just good tucker. With the hunt over, It's a long, hard walk back to the camp. Juby really cares for his little dogs. They were given to him in Broome and never leave the family. On the way, he lights a fire to signal their return home. The evening meal is prepared, and before dinner, Juby hangs up his shirt. The day's catch, crabs, shellfish and yams, are all cooked on the open fire. Inside the pandanus nuts are small peanut-like seeds. These people used to travel great distances on primitive mangrove rafts. We asked Juby about them, and he says he'll build us one. We travel to an isolated section of the coast, and here we learn one of the ancient skills of these people. With a sharpened piece of hardwood, he methodically cuts through the soft roots. Juby carefully selects a particular species of mangrove. This timber only grows in certain areas. Juby, a big man and very fit for his 62 years, works hard until 17 shafts have been collected. Back on Biana Island again, construction is slow. The poles are held together with nails shaped from hard wattle wood. The mangrove poles are soft, like balsa wood, and the hard nails are easily driven in. Mawado, Juby's half-brother, can remember when every family along this section of the coast owned one of these strange craft. The job takes days. We're fascinated, and we spend hours watching the progress. It's many years since these rafts were commonly used, and Juby tells us that he was a very young man when he built his last one. The raft is constructed in two sections. Luke, Juby's eldest son, ties them together to make the raft more stable. Today he's after turtles, and he moves out into the main current. The northwest coast of Australia has one of the highest tides in the world, and these Aborigines used to travel extensively on the swift tidal currents, hopping from island to island on the tide changes. Luke patiently stalks a turtle, lying down whenever it surfaces for air. And when he's within range, he drives a harpoon home as the reptile dives. The hunt is successful because these people have an intimate understanding of the turtle's behavior and are able to outwit the creature with skill and with patience. On his return to camp, Luke prepares the turtle for cooking. He removes the intestines, and Dave helps him to push hot stones from the fire inside the carcass. Instant steam cooking. Finally, the turtle is left on the hot coals to cook. And so, another day with the Bardi people ends. As we feast on the rich meat, the tranquility of the evening settles in a mood of perfect contentment. The island children have an easy, carefree life. These boys are practicing their hunting technique. An old turtle shell acts as the quarry. The other children are picking out the immature eggs from the remains of a turtle. They find them delicious. The older people still like to maintain their link with the past. Sarah is spinning hair to make belts. The belts will carry pearl shell ornaments used during corroborees. The elaborately carved pearl shells are treasured by their owners. They've been passed down from father to son. Recently among the men, there's been renewed interest in their culture, and once again ceremonies are being performed. To make the body paint, bark is chewed. It has a nauseating, bitter taste, but this doesn't seem to worry Luke. As the tribal patterns dry, they become a vivid white. After sundown, the men assemble in the center of the camp to reenact the exploits of their tribe's deceased leaders. This ceremony tells a story of Tom Wigan's father. The men mime in sequence his journey from the mainland to Sunday Island. He traveled on a mangrove raft, and as the journey progressed, a tremendous storm built up. Threatening black clouds rolled across the sky and lightning flashed. These totems represent the approaching storm, the antenna extension symbolizing the flashing lightning. The storm broke and carried the raft many miles off course, through rough, foaming seas and shark-infested water. He reached a sandbar and staggered ashore to rest. Eventually, he pushed through the bush and looked out towards his homeland. He felt very sad. As each totem is displayed, it represents a chapter in the epic. The older men chant the story for the dancers. Reaching his homeland, he fought with spears and woomera. As old age overcame him, he died. This dance depicts his death. As he lay dead, the spirits of his deceased tribesmen arrived rejoicing and guiding him to his grave. The longer we camp with the Bardi people, the more involved we become in their traditional past. Drugging fish with roots is a technique that is rarely practiced today. Juby's grandfather used this method to feed his family, and now, 50 years later, we perform the same task. When the bag's full, we move to the beach. The roots are thoroughly pounded and mixed with sand. At low tide, Juby takes us to a large rock pool, and there he distributes the mixture. As the drug clouds the water, hiding fish swim erratically into the open. This small cod, high on the drug, has flipped right out of the pool. After a few minutes, it's just a matter of collecting up the drugged fish as quickly as they appear. Little Skipper revels in the excitement. We collect more than 40, mostly surgeon fish. The drug kills the fish quickly, but they're still good to eat. Dave finds a baler shell producing eggs. We admire this delicate construction, then replace it, and she continues laying. Whenever the tide's low, there's a feast fit for a king. Miles of rock oysters all along the coast. If you like oysters, this is a paradise. All across the reef, danger lurks. Perhaps the most beautiful of the deadly creatures is the tiny blue-ringed octopus. Changing colour as it moves, like a neon sign, it attracts attention. No antidote can be developed for its bite, and death is swift. However, it's a shy animal and retreats from Dave's probing knife. So another day ends, and it's almost time for us to continue north along the coast. But before we can sail, our crew want to leave plenty of food for their families. Tom is out after dugong. And there's one just coming up for air. With a mighty effort, Tom lunges with his harpoon. Desperately, he releases the front section of the raft. This minimizes resistance, and the harpoon is less likely to pull out. When the dugong is completely exhausted, Tom retrieves the front section and quickly drowns the mammal. Although dugong are protected, Aborigines are allowed to hunt them for food. The meat is cut into small pieces, salted and dried on the rocks. This way it lasts for weeks. We've never seen Aborigines treat meat like this before, and we suppose they've learned it from the Malay pearlers. These men, Tom, Peter and old Juby, will be coming with us when we continue up the coast. As the time for departure nears, Juby worries about the trip. Only he understands the dangers ahead. We're pleased that he's decided to come. He's the one man who really knows the Kimberley coast. It feels great to be back on board again, and we waste no time getting underway. We catch the tide through the Sunday Island Straits, heading for Talbot Bay.